Hi there, welcome to this Raw News exclusive interview with the SU President at the University of Warwick, Luke Mepham. And it's the start of term two, a very different start of term than we expected with the UK in lockdown, people at home. There's a lot of questions that need to be answered, and we can bring in Luke Mepham now. Hi, Luke, great to see you.
Hello, good afternoon. How you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you. And you can tell us today that those who have empty rooms on campus, where they're at home and they can't go to their room on campus, legally not allowed to go, they're going to get some money back.
Absolutely. So I've just come from a meeting with the university's finance director and the accommodation team, and the university have confirmed that they're going to be issuing refunds for 5 weeks for students on campus who can't make it to campus for whatever reason. So that's not refunds for people in Warwick accommodation managed properties off campus. That's something that we're still going to be pushing for. But the university are initially giving a 5-week rent waiver. That's a hard one to say, for students on campus.
And your reaction to that?
It's great news. I mean, it's in line with other universities, so it's really, really good to see that Warwick following suit. They are going to keep the kind of situation under surveillance, essentially, so that if the lockdown is extended beyond mid-February, rent refunds may be extended also. But it's just this initial 5-week period, so from the 11th of Jan until the middle of February, and then they're not going to be expecting students to pay their rent for the rest of term until the beginning of March.
We've got many questions from Warwick students. One from Imogen here who says, what is the SU's stance on rent reductions for Warwick managed accommodation? This is Warwick accommodation off campus in second, third, fourth years. Do you think the SU should be doing more to push for this now we cannot come back? People will be calling for parity between on campus and off campus accommodation.
Absolutely. So our stance is that all students should be refunded for accommodation where they cannot return to it, whether that's on campus, off campus, privately managed. So there's several different prongs to our kind of lobbying there. We're working with lots of other SU presidents around the country, specifically with Russell Group SU presidents, to try and push the government into kind of issuing rent rebates and reductions for students, especially considering they're the ones that have put these measures into place, stopping students from coming back to their accommodation with no kind of measures to support them at all. We're also lobbying the university to provide refunds to off-campus Warwick accommodation managed properties. They're managed in a very, very different way to on-campus ones, as they kind of already pay the landlords in advance, regardless of whether students are there or not. But we still believe that they should be providing refunds for them students. And then we're also going to be supporting students who are in privately managed off-campus accommodation by contacting kind of larger providers, asking them to issue refunds, but also helping students to contact their landlords if they want to request refunds themselves as well.
I understand the calls for Warwick accommodation off campus refunds. You know, it's a part of the university. It's probably easier to do than it is just a student in a private house off campus.
Absolutely.
If you're calling for this, how do you think they should go about doing it?
I mean, there's several different ways that we've explored. So it could be kind of with the on-campus situation, it's not a blanket refund to all students. It's those that say that they're not coming onto campus, and so those that are actually in their on-campus accommodation will be expected to pay their rent still. Obviously, it'd be a lot harder to monitor an off-campus accommodation, but they could be relying on students' goodwill, or alternatively, if the funds are there and if student sentiment goes that way, then they could just be looking at issuing kind of a blanket rent refund to students off campus as a gesture of goodwill, really, if anything.
If in this period where we're waiting to hear about Warwick accommodation and private accommodation, do you as a student union encourage people to be rent striking, to not be paying that rent?
So the rent strike's a really difficult one because it's not something that's being organised by the Students' Union, but we are here to support students who are rent striking. So if you do choose to take part in the rent strike, our advice centre is available to you, so you can kind of get your legal advice and understand what steps and what rights you have in that regard. We're also acting as the go-between between the kind of rent strike collective and the university, so putting their demands to the university and kind of pushing those forwards. I'm not going to say that all students should go and rent strike. It definitely is something that it is up to you. Rent strikes have been known to work in the past. However, there are risks associated with them, and it's up to individual students to kind of assess whether they want to take on those risks and join the collective, or kind of lobby for change in different ways, perhaps.
Let's move away from rent fees to tuition fees, because we're not going to get the same style, at least maybe quality of education starting this term online, where many of us had in-person teaching in the last term. Nationally, over 260,000 people have signed a petition calling on universities and the government to partially refund tuition fees, or maybe even drop them for this year altogether. Does the SU support this call?
Absolutely. I mean, as an SU, we're always standing for kind of a free and liberated education where any students don't have to pay for their education, and kind of opposed to the marketization of education. And so stemming from that, we're obviously kind of completely behind the movement for the removal of tuition fees for this year, or the reduction of tuition fees. And that's something that we're working with other SU presidents on, and other SU sabbatical officers, to kind of try and put a little bit of pressure on the government to actually take control of this and to take responsibility for it, really. It's as a result of kind of government actions, and obviously the pandemic isn't completely to blame on the government, but a lot of it has been exacerbated by the government's actions, and this term included with the lockdown. So I think we're really trying to put pressure on the government to pay tuition fees to universities, so that students can have them reduced and kind of have that little bit less of student loan debt once they graduate. We're not really focusing our efforts on lobbying the university for tuition fee refunds, because it's never going to happen. It's not the kind of thing that the university will ever do. They simply couldn't afford it. I don't think any university could afford it. So we're really turning our kind of attention and putting pressure on the government.
Because universities set the tuition fees with the maximum set by the government, but as you say, it's unlikely the university would do anything without government support. Let's talk on academic issues, because exams are online this year for most students if they've got them. This was a situation this time last year, and we had a no detriment policy, which said your education and your results wouldn't be damaged by the pandemic. Seb Maxted asks what work is being done towards a safety net or a no detriment policy, given the disruption to learning this year.
So a lot of work's actually gone on behind the scenes over this week. So the week zero, essentially to start developing a safety net policy on top of all of the mitigations that have already been put in place for this academic year. So that work's been kind of led by Megan, our education officer, and Shingai, our postgrad officer, and they're doing excellent work with the university to try and make sure that no students, or to lessen the disruption to students' academic performance over this year. So obviously a no detriment policy, the same as last year, isn't really feasible, based on the fact that the university actually have very little academic data on most current students that's kind of from outside of the pandemic, or that wasn't affected by last year's no detriment policy. And the Russell Group on Thursday released a statement saying that none of their universities would have a no detriment policy, which while the statement could have been written a lot better, it's kind of in line with the thinking of the safety net policy here at Warwick. So I think whilst details of the safety net are going to be published on Tuesday, I know that ideas that have been floated around are things like blanket extensions, or increasing the number of self-certifications for mitigating circumstances, and also things like more flexibility with grade boundaries. So don't hold me to any of those, because those are all just ideas that we floated around, but there is going to be a very good package of support, and that is actually on top of some of the support that's been lobbied for earlier on in the year. So all students now have the opportunity to self-certify for extensions twice in the academic year. That's a new change this year. Also, resit fees have been permanently dropped, and also for further first attempts, fees have also been dropped. So there is a lot of flexibility for students. A lot of the stuff actually was already in place at the beginning of this year. So it's kind of just enhancing that to make sure that no one falls through the net. That's a nice little metaphor there. No one falls through the net. So we've got the safety net. But yeah, details of that should be coming out on Tuesday, hopefully.
So the details are coming on Tuesday, but on the extensions in particular, what is the SU's argument? Should there be self-certification where you can get yourself an extension without having to have it sort of signed off? Should there be greater extension leniency? What is the SU's view on this?
So we absolutely are always in favour of leniency, and also making it a lot easier for students to self-certify, and that the university should put trust in those students that they are being completely honest when they say that they need to self-certify for an extension on an assignment. And so at the beginning of the year, the SU did manage to get the university to put in these two self-certification opportunities as standard. So that's absolutely something that we support. And if the university can give any blanket extensions for students, or indeed more flexibility, such as more self-certification opportunities, then we're absolutely backing that. It really is a kind of balancing act of finding the right combination of measures that means that all students kind of can be on a level playing field, no one's disadvantaged, and also putting measures in place that don't benefit one faculty more than the other. Obviously, the way that science, the SEM faculties, assignments and such work is very, very different to the arts faculty. So it's really just trying to find that balance that means that all students can be properly supported.
Luke, let's talk about international students, because last term many international students felt ignored, felt abandoned by the university, and at times maybe the ESU, if they were at home, weren't able to come to the UK or weren't able to have the same sort of education. What is the ESU doing to support these students?
So obviously with the flip to everyone being online, it will help to kind of bring them together as part of the community. Everyone's in the same boat, everyone's in the same thing, albeit from all different areas all around the world. So we're going to be continuing to support international students by kind of holding events and such. We're going to try and do more community building events, absolutely conscious that some students haven't a chance to even come to the UK yet to study at the university and make friends with societies and stuff. So that's something that Ollie, the societies officer, is going to be leading on alongside some of these societies, particularly the cultural societies, but also making sure that the university is kind of putting in considerations for international students. So flexibility in terms of time zones, also things like looking at international fees, which are obviously significantly higher, and also looking at kind of the rental agreements for international students. So encouraging the university to allow international students a lot more flexibility as to whether they want to continue with their kind of rental agreements, or whether they want to opt out of them and not travel to the UK at any point in the academic year. So really just allowing for more flexibility so that international students can either come to university if they want to, or have a very, very good experience wherever they may be in the world.
If someone wants to or needs to go on a year abroad next year, would you encourage them to get ready, get prepared and sign up to do a year abroad?
I think I'd say absolutely still sign up for a year abroad. It's something that you can kind of opt out of in a later date. It's easier to express interest now and then go back on it, I think. The university are still planning as if there will be years abroad next year. So I'd say definitely still go down that route, still explore that. It hopefully won't end up being the case that you're on a year abroad, kind of sitting in Paris, but learning all of your, doing all your lectures and everything on a laptop. That wouldn't really be ideal, but yeah, I'd still urge students that if you want to go on a year abroad, you should still pursue that. Obviously, we don't know what's going to come out of the discontinuation of the Erasmus Plus scheme as a result of Brexit. But we're hopeful that, I know the university are very, very keen, seeing themselves as a European and international university, to really enable students to go abroad. So I can't see there being too much interruption in student mobility and years abroad over the years to come.
As you mentioned, we've left the EU and the Erasmus scheme is to be replaced by the Turing scheme. Are you pleased that the government have introduced this new, what they call, world-beating scheme?
I mean, obviously, we're still waiting for the details, so I can't really give my opinion on the scheme as a whole. But it's a great step that that the university are committing to doing something to replace the Erasmus Plus scheme, which was excellent at enabling a great amount of student mobility around the EU. Obviously, we have ties to several other European universities through the Utopia project, which is a really, really good project, kind of looking at the idea of a European university, so kind of free movement between those universities. Obviously, Brexit throws a bit of a spanner in the works there, but that's something else to be excited about. But yeah, I eagerly await the government's kind of details on the Turing scheme.
Now, throughout my 3 years at Warwick, something which has dominated and always been there are these shame on you Warwick protests. Of course, there was the sort of major one which happened a couple of years ago. There's been lots of discussions around harassment and people feeling safe really on campus. What is the SU doing to fix the countless issues that students have raised with the way Warwick deals with sexual assault and harassment? Because there's been quite a lot of criticism pointed your way recently.
Absolutely. So obviously it's an ongoing project, the tackling sexual misconduct on campus, and a huge amount of work was done by the SU a few years ago as a response to the group chat scandal, working with the university and lobbying the university to implement report and support, which is kind of a reporting. It's exactly what it says in the tin. You can report sexual misconduct and then be faced with your options, and given quite a lot of support and kind of signposted to other support, and just given the kind of flexibility and options, so it's completely survivor led. So the SU has been, over the past month or so, well, towards the end of last term, after a lot of issues were raised online, and we actually realized that a lot of students weren't aware that this report and support tool existed, weren't aware of the support that was available. And so we started working with It Happens Here Society, the organisers of Shame on You Warwick, and other groups, our women's officer and our trans students officer at the SU. And we started working with the university to make sure that the kind of the promotional materials for report and support were up to scratch. So we've managed to get approval for things like getting stickers on the back of kitchen doors and toilet doors, stupid things that previously weren't allowed by the university, but actually have a huge amount of difference, can make a huge amount of difference, but also all the way to things like looking at the sanctions that are given, and also kind of the whole reporting and supporting experience and how we can make that better. We're exploring things like active bystander courses. We've had a motion passed last term for those to be mandatory for students. So that takes into account a lot more than just consent. It does kind of teach what consent is and how it should be applied, and also teaches a lot about kind of how you can support people if you see kind of incidents of sexual misconduct or other hate crimes kind of happening, how you can support that. So that's something that we're looking at rolling out to a lot more students. We're also doing a lot more staff training within the SU, and also pushing it at the university to make sure that staff know how to kind of handle a sexual misconduct disclosure to them. So it is absolutely, it's an ongoing piece of work. A lot of work was done towards the end of last term, and at the end of week 1 of this term, we're going to be publishing our timeline for kind of when we can expect staff to be fully trained, when we can expect these courses to be rolled out and stuff. But there is a lot more work to be done, but there is absolutely the will, and the work has started to be done, and we made a great amount of progress towards the end of last term.
Your name and Warwick SU's name has been on much of this criticism on social media. Could you have done more to support these students?
I think probably overall the university and the SU dropped the ball on kind of promoting report and support. There was such a big push last year when it was kind of rolled out, that then I think there was kind of the assumption from everyone that students all knew about it, and it was actually this movement that that kind of made it apparent that actually loads and loads of students weren't aware that it existed. So it has been kind of the kick that we've all needed to kind of promote it a lot more, but also a lot of positive changes come out of it. There was a statement released on Instagram by Shame on You Warwick, actually the day after we had a really, really constructive meeting with them and the university, kind of addressing all of their concerns and putting timelines to those. So that was disappointing to see, but I think they're absolutely, everyone is committed completely to tackling these issues. I think, like, if you do have issues, what I would urge you to do is to contact us, let us know kind of what your concerns are, and then we can deal with them. It's tricky, I think, especially being remote. We don't always know exactly what the issues are, and think that kind of students know what report and support is, students know how it works. So absolutely, if you're having issues, my plea is, please let us know and we will deal with them.
For the last 9 or 10 months, you've been the SU president at Warwick, or you certainly elected 9 or 10 months ago. Before that, you were the society's officer. So you're obviously, passionate about democracy in the SU, and the spring elections are coming up, and people can nominate themselves to one of the positions. I assume you'd really be encouraging people to do that.
Absolutely. So obviously, I'm hoping that the next academic year is going to be a slightly less uprooted, I suppose, than this one has been. And I mean, even this year, being a sabbatical officer is a great experience. You learn a hell of a lot of skills. It's a very stressful role. You have a lot of responsibility at what is quite a young age, I suppose, but it really, really is great fun. If you're incredibly passionate about kind of making change and very, very motivated to support students, then absolutely go for it. You don't have the opportunity to do it unless you're a student. It's a really, really great thing to do. I absolutely urge anyone to do it. And when it's on campus, it's even more fun. So you get to kind of help out with events and stuff, and actually just see people in person and get to meet so many new people. But yeah, no, and obviously the spring elections are coming up. It's going to be a very, very different year to run and stand in the elections. I know someone would correct me there if I say run, so I'm going to say stand. If you stand in the elections, it's going to be a very, very different experience. Like campaigning is going to be very, very weird doing it all online, but it should still be a good experience, and hopefully we'll be able to kind of still make it exciting for candidates and also for the students.
Yeah, and we'll be interested to see how it all pans out over the course of their year. Well, Luke, thanks so much for talking to Raw News today. That's Luke Mepham, the SU president at Warwick University. Thanks, Luke.
Thanks for having me.
Across campus, online, and on 12:51 AM. This is your student radio station.